Today's video is about common wisdom. How are you taking advice? Whose opinion matters? And why are you making choices? That sounds like a long list, but I've condensed it down to 2 examples. Let's start with deferring mortgage payments. Mortgage lenders' contribution to Canadians' well-being during a pandemic, or a misleading ad campaign that takes advantage of Canadians' vulnerability. There are strong opinions on both sides. Or maybe there's another way to look at this. When we're talking about your mortgage and the option to defer, what does it mean to you and why did you or didn't you? I had a 90-minute meeting with a transition client last week. The consultation was part of his severance package. There isn't a long-term engagement or in-depth planning expected. This time was to focus on his biggest concerns around finances now that he's got a gap in his earnings. So 2 weeks ago, he deferred his mortgage for 6 months when he received the severance letter. His financial advisor told him 1 week ago that he shouldn't have done that. The client said that he trusted his advisor, but wanted to know what I thought. Then the client went on to say that in March and April, many of his friends told him that he should defer his mortgage. And at the time, he said, "No, I'm still working and the mortgage is affordable. I don't want to do that." And then he said a little bit more about why he decided to defer 2 weeks ago. He said it just felt better. It relieved some pressure. It was an emotional decision. And then he said, "What do you think?" Here's what I think. He pulled some short-term control of his expenses away from the bank and back to his family. His biggest asset is his accumulated career experience, his skills, and the ability to interview well. If deferring his mortgage temporarily relieves some stress, contributes to a better interview, and he's consequently reemployed faster, deferring was a great option. Does the deferral increase the amount that he will overall owe the bank? On paper today, it does, but there are several options to prepay the mortgage that he can use once he's reemployed. So this part of the conversation happened near the end of our 90-minute meeting. By then, I already knew that over the last 12 to 18 months, they had saved about 40% of his take-home income. The severance is roughly equivalent to 12 months of his take-home income. So he's really got 12 months to find another job without an interruption to the money available to his family. And if he doesn't find a job in that timeline because his industry is changing, he's got about another year's worth of expenses in the bank between that savings account and a GIC. So for this client personally, the criticism that the banks offer pushes clients further underwater by lengthening and increasing their debt doesn't apply to him. The only way it would apply to him, based on his past behavior of saving, is if he can't find reemployment anywhere near his previous salary. And in that case, he and his family were going to need that relief on their month-to-month expenses. So media opinions and family and friend opinions didn't apply well to his situation. He had made a good decision based on his current circumstances, and during our meeting, we reviewed his options to reverse the long-term effects of deferring those payments. And so for the second example, we often forget the control that we have over our own situation, especially when we're dealing with intense situations or long habits. So the first example was a good one for intense situations. The second example really talks about long habits. One of my clients several years ago had made changes in where their monthly income was coming from and who was receiving a salary from the corporation. Long story short, she was writing a salary check every month from the corporate account to the personal account, and she felt awful every time she did it. So we had reviewed the changes with her accountant. Numerically, it made sense for the family, but she really hated writing that check. And so in our meeting, when she brought this up, I reviewed the strategy, she understood it, and it still made long-term sense. So after confirming that the pain point really was just writing that check, I recommended she set up an automatic e-transfer between the accounts. Problem solved. So she had been writing checks since they opened the corporation. She just hadn't considered the other ways that she could move that money. So sometimes when our long-term goals shift or our needs change, sometimes we need to remember to change the habits that we've been using for the old strategy. They don't always fit well for the new strategy. So when your finances are causing you stress, it's important to step back, figure out who you're listening to, where the advice is coming from, what your actual priorities are today, and what strategies you're using to solve that problem. And it was so good. If I could only find a really good ending, and I can't. So yeah, we might have to do this all over again, and I'm going to get a better ending.